aims to answer the question, what are the pragmatic functions of wage and nikan as discourse markers in Sri Lankan English speech, and it aims to highlight the significance of discourse markers and their pragmatic functions in bilingual spoken language. Sometimes code alternation is often viewed as a danger to the authenticity of the legitimacy of the language, but this study hopes to help demonstrate the ease with which words can travel across codes to adapt to familiar and frequent usage patterns among bilingual speakers. This will be the progression of my presentation today. I will first give a few definitions, including that of discourse markers. Then I will give a brief background to my study, followed by a brief review of existing literature, my data and methodology, and finally findings and implications of the study. To start off with a few definitions, Sri Lankan English is the language used by Sri Lankans who choose to use English for whatever purposes in Sri Lanka. Discourse markers are small words that can perform various discourse pragmatic functions, and these are words in English, for example, like, actually, well, so, and all of these words have a core semantic meaning. Discourse markers are words that can retain their semantic meaning while expanding their pragmatic meanings and functions. So as you will see in these examples, the presence of discourse markers is not mandatory for the sentence to make sense. They are often semantically and grammatically optional, and they can be excluded from utterances without any syntactic or semantic consequences. And you will see that the examples that I discuss in this presentation, the sentences make perfect sense without the discourse markers, but its presence adds something pragmatic to the utterance, and this meaning of it becomes informed by the context in which it is used. This is a significant interpretation when studying spoken language, as there will be many situations where meaning will have to be developed in situated use due to the informal nature of discourse markers in private spoken speech. There are two types of discourse marker functions. Textual function relates to the structuring of discourse as text, while interpersonal function relates to the expression of speaker attitude and to the organization of social exchange. Together, these two constitute pragmatic meaning, and the markers in my study are mainly concerned with interpersonal functions, and the selected markers perform interpersonal functions of hedging, indirectness, and politeness. And there are many different types of discourse markers as well, but I just want to introduce you to the two that are relevant to my study. One is downtoners, which minimize the force of an imposition by providing a mitigating effect, and there are politeness markers which perform the interactive interpersonal function of face saving and indirectness. When it comes to existing research on discourse markers, the theoretical approaches are rooted mainly in the study of English language and discourse markers. So there's a lot of work done on discourse markers in the English language, but in recent decades, many studies have been conducted on language mixing and bilingual discourse markers, such as the use of Sinhala discourse markers in Sri Lankan English, for example. And in these studies, it has been observed that bilinguals often switch languages when verbalizing discourse. I call this code alternation to include both code switching and code mixing. So when such repeated patterns of language use become sedimented to a very high degree in language, we tend to witness an across-the-board change in the replacement of certain features, and we start to see the alternate usage of words and phrases in a discourse marker system of one language with influence from another language. So studies of discourse markers in bilingual conversation then are of prime importance to the study of language contact and change. In general, Sri Lankan English as a distinct variety is less. Research on Sri Lankan English as a distinct variety is less when compared to more established varieties of English, and there is a severe gap of research concerning the use of discourse markers in Sri Lankan English, especially ones that have come about due to bilingual speech patterns. So Algama has done a corpus-based pilot study on discourse markers which explore specific terms in Sinhala and how it can influence certain English markers. And then there's a study done by Pereira and Strauss which examines the functions of two Sinhala discourse markers, may and then, and highlights their polyfunctionality. I have previously worked on the functions of Sri Lankan discourse markers ane, may, and within in Sri Lankan English. This study will contribute to this existing research. Moving on to my methodology, the data for my study has been taken from the private conversations in the spoken section of the Sri Lankan component of the International Corpus of English, also known as ISSL, which includes face-to-face conversations and telephone conversations. This section was selected because informal private conversations which are more intimate and comfortable in nature can be identified as eliciting frequent use of discourse markers, and I have selected these corpus were read in its entirety manually to identify and analyze functions, and I have also examined the data using the anti-concordance program, and in addition, theories of discourse marker related studies have been used, and my native speaker confidence in the Sinhala language was also helpful in analyzing what inspires usage in particular contexts. Moving on to my findings, nikang. So according to the Mother Dictionary, nikang has a semantic meaning of being or feeling free, aimless, or being without purpose. It is both an adverb and an adjective. Like you see on the slide, we say mama nikang hiya. It's expressing a state or nature of being. According to Mailer's Dictionary of Sri Lankan English, it means plain or normal, like we say nikang palm. But when we look at the pragmatic functions, you will see how nikang expands beyond this core semantic meaning. Nikang is a heavily interpersonal function whose usage is sometimes motivated by politeness, and it does not have the same indexical potential as discourse markers like oh, now, then has, since they are like textual discourse markers which helps to create text or build up discourse or to organize discourse. But nikang doesn't necessarily organize discourse, but it is a frequent element in speech which orchestrates emotions and opinions by either highlighting them or downtoning them. In my first example, I have analyzed it as an emphatic element. So speaker B in this example is talking about how they are tired and didn't go to the gym because their body was hurting. They say ඊට පස්සේ කහවෙන්ද නිකන් අමාරුයි නිකන් ඇඟට හරි නැහැ. There is a double use of nikang here when they talk about their body hurting. I argue that the use of nikang here brings an emphatic and strengthening element to the utterance. It is a content-oriented usage here, and it comments impersonally on the validity of the proposition that the speaker asserts. The use of nikang also serves to emphasize the way the speaker is feeling while also creating common ground between the hearer and the listener. The emphasis is not strong enough to overpower the hearer, and if you read the sentence without the double use of nikang in this sentence, it still makes sense, but its inclusion serves to emphasize what the speaker is trying to convey while maintaining a conversational tone. In this second example, it's slightly different and has a sort of textual function as well. This use of nikang assumes shared knowledge. The speakers are discussing about a girl who has gone through a breakup in a relationship and is still behaving the way she did before, asserting that she has not changed and she should really think about the way she conducts herself. And when A says nikang are they are assuming shared knowledge between the speakers, and B confirms this by saying I know, signaling comprehension. So the use of nikang here signals how the information should be received by the hearer and does so politely without offending the hearer. The hearer is a partner of cooperation in this conversation, and the use of nikang also signals that the knowledge is simple and commonplace. I can only discuss like a few examples per discourse marker due to time constraints, so I will move on to my second discourse marker, which is bage. It's a polysemous marker whose main semantic meaning is like or as. It's usually used to signal similarity between two things. In the example on the screen, we have he doesn't have තාත්තගේ look එකක් නේ තනිකර අම්මා වගේ, which is posing a comparison. And then there's another example on the screen. It says තාත්තා කෙනෙක් දරුවෙක් පරිස්සම් කරනවා වගේ පරිස්සම් කරේ. This is saying protected me in the way a father protects a child, which again poses a comparison. Then we also use it to mean something is about to happen, like we say wahinda wage. But pragmatically, we find it to be a sentence final discourse marker with downtoning elements. For example, this example on the screen, the speaker is describing an engineering faculty and how isolated it is. There are two utterances that use the sentence final wage, but it is not posing a similarity like the semantic meaning did. So the sentence final wage here has no tie to the preceding content of the sentence, and in fact, both sentences make perfect sense without the use of wage. So what does wage then achieve here? Use of wage at the end of these utterances introduces an element of vagueness to the proposition that the speaker is making. So when the speaker says it is wholly separated from other faculties wage, or it's sort of isolated and nobody like goes and checks in wage. The use of the wage at, sorry? 3 minutes. Okay. I did 15 minutes, right? Sorry. The use of wage at the end of these utterances introduces an element of vagueness, and we could say that the speaker is not 100% sure and is exercising caution. It is almost like saying sort of in English, which actually has been used in the second instance, and there wage could be read as a reiteration of the caution and uncertainty conveyed through sort of. Even though there is a degree of uncertainty on the part of the speaker, it also invokes common ground between the speakers, and it softens the utterance, which makes it a hedging particle as well. In this next example, it is used at the end of an utterance to estimate an amount for a loan that the speaker should get. The use of wage here, while it is used outside of its semantic meaning, signals to the listener that the speaker is not sure of the exact amount. Once again, there is uncertainty that is evoked on the part of the speaker, but it is conveyed casually. It's sort of like an adjuster where the speaker is able to deal with the general thing that they are saying and be fluid with it while not getting go of the concrete object of the utterance. This is an interpersonal function that expresses speaker attitude. In conclusion, the pragmatic functions of nikang and wage go far beyond their core meaning to act as interpersonal particles and hedges and politeness markers. As markers of politeness and indirectness, both wage and nikang display expressive and interpersonal functions when they have no textual bond with the preceding discourse. The use of nikang, as we saw, assumed shared knowledge, and it was used to be emphatic in a polite manner, while wage in the sentence final position conveyed an uncertain, cautious, and casual attitude in the speaker. Future studies should also examine the functions that come about from the prosody of these markers to see how their interpersonal functions change and expand accordingly in various settings and types of discourse markers, and the same goes for other Sinhala and Sri Lankan English discourse markers as well. Such studies, I believe, are important because language is always changing, and phenomena such as bilingualism, which allows for the sharing of language norms, have become very common mechanisms of this change. Language change is often regarded as a sort of corruption or giving into undesirable elements, when in reality it is common as social exchange, social change, and cannot be stopped. Sometimes such change tends to be viewed as a crisis that must be averted, when instead it should be embraced. All changes to Sinhala and English are a reflection of how people and their lives and experiences have changed over the years. And phenomena such as the borrowing and mixing of discourse markers is an example of such change. Refusal to embrace this type of language contact contributes to the myth of pure languages, which is a crisis in today's linguistic landscape. Research is needed to drive acceptance towards the mixing of language, which can manifest on sentence levels as small as discourse markers. And the mixing of discourse markers demonstrates the influence of bilingualism and, more importantly, reflects the linguistic reality of Sinhala English bilingual speakers in Sri Lanka today. And this language change that I spoke of has greatly increased the scope of potential future pragmatic studies as well, resulting in a lot of very interesting areas for research. And this study was an effort to contribute to filling such a research gap. Thank you for listening, and here are my references.